law firm, Malkin Law, and I do cannabis law nationally through Hobbs Law Group, which is based in Denver, and we have lawyers in all states with legal cannabis, as well as around the world in a couple other countries. And today we're going to talk a little about the alcohol, beverage, and cannabis industries and how they interact. And to my immediate left, I have Paul Hletko from Few Spirits, and then Dawson Hobbs from WSWA, which is the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, and next to him is Wallin from Vertical. We did have another panelist, Victor Jerez, but he had a death in the family, so he wasn't able to attend. And he was also going to supply the non-alcoholic, non-THC beer, but unless Nicole has Dickel for everybody, I would recommend pulling out your vape pens or drinking whatever you have, and we'll make do, I guess. Assuming it's legal, of course, thank you for this. So just sort of as a way to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of the landscape and what we're all talking about. So we have a couple of different things going on. We have both hemp-derived CBD. Hemp became federally legal through the Farm Bill, and hemp is basically both from the cannabis sativa L plant, but the hemp is the non-psychoactive portion with less than 0.3 or 0.3% or less of THC, and that's where largely the CBD that you see in the shelf is coming from. While you can get CBD from the flower, the ones that you see in terms of all the products on the shelf, other than in dispensaries, is hemp-derived CBD. There are a number. CBD stands for cannabidiol, and there's a number of cannabinoids within the hemp profile. So you'll sometimes see something that says full spectrum hemp seed oil or full spectrum, and that means that it includes not only CBD but all of the other cannabinoids that might be within there. So you have to be careful just in terms of labeling the products and what you're getting. If something says CBD and it also says full spectrum, then perhaps there's a little bit of a problem there, just because technically it would be more than just CBD. But that aside, the issues going on currently that you've probably seen, where some states, including New York City, or cities, and then also states like Massachusetts and California, are saying that you can't put CBD into food or drinks, is because while federally you have the hemp plant legal through the Farm Bill, CBD has also been approved as a drug by FDA. So basically the issue is that now you're putting what has been approved as a drug into a food product that's not approved by FDA. So there's a little bit of a conflict there, and that's what is going on, and you've probably seen in the press, and Smoke's kind of been on the forefront of that, and he'll get into that a little bit later. And then of course you have the THC, the flower plant, which is sold, of course, in the recreational states and dispensaries, and in the medical states and dispensaries as well. Just want to kind of make sure we all know the nomenclature. So I wanted Dawson to kind of give us an overview of where we are in terms of, all of the different legislation going on within the cannabis industry. So why don't you kick it off?
Yeah. So I guess the thing to point out is there's a lot of activity and interest at the federal level, both in Congress and the agencies. And so there's when people say what's going on with cannabis, it's a multifaceted answer. And so just to start a little bit with what Ryan was talking about, you kind of have this regulatory effort surrounding CBD that's happening, which is sort of contradictory. You talk to the USDA and they say they're implementing the Farm Bill and they're full steam ahead. You talk to FDA and they say, well, it's used in a prescription drug and you can't do anything with it yet, and we don't have a process to verify that it's coming from hemp. And then you talk to DOJ or TTB and they have a completely different view of the world, and sometimes they say, go talk to the other agency that you just talked to. And then there's what's going on in Congress. And now there are about 30 bills dealing with cannabis in one way or the other pending in Congress. The most notable couple are something called the States Act, which has been introduced and is primarily a Senate effort led by Senators Warren and Senator Gardner. And that is a bill that would simply give states the right to legalize cannabis and recognize that businesses doing business in states that have legalized cannabis in accordance with those state laws would be immune from federal prosecution. The other one, which has gotten more movement on the House side, but now is getting some discussion in the Senate, is the Safe Banking Act, which very specifically deals with the issues surrounding what you can do with the money that comes from a cannabis-related business, and some of the tax implications that come from the fact that it's a federally illegal product. It also addresses some issues specific to the insurance business. That bill has passed out of committee in the House, and we expect it to pass the full House any day now. But it really does not have any projection for movement in the Senate. They are having a hearing on it this next week, but no markup is expected, so we don't expect them to actually advance that bill. It's very interesting because this really is tied up in a larger debate than cannabis itself, right? This goes into the sort of dysfunction that both houses of Congress are dealing with in the administration. And, you know, I think if anybody put either bill just up for a straight up or down vote on the floor of either house, it probably has a pretty good chance of passage. Certainly in the House it does. But the fact is that's not how Congress works. And so, unfortunately, it's tied up in, you know, issues surrounding they need to raise the budget cap, they need to raise the debt limit, they have to pass appropriations bills. Right now, there's no real path for doing so. And so, you know, it gets mired down in the larger political discussion. And then also in the Senate, Senator McConnell, Majority Leader McConnell, has a strong interest in supporting Kentucky's hemp industry and definitely wants to be supportive of anything that helps that. But he personally is not real keen on overall cannabis legalization. And I think it's unlikely that he'll put any significant legislation on the floor of the Senate. The sort of wild card in that is if we get to next spring, this fall, next spring, next summer, and he feels that moving something cannabis related, I think particularly the most likely candidate would be something surrounding the banking issues. If he feels that that would help some of his senators that are in tough re-election fights next year, then the political calculus changes a little bit. So that's probably the most likely scenario for anything actually moving. So while there's a lot of legislation pending, about 30 pieces, it's not likely any of them become law, I would say, before the end of this calendar year.
And I should have mentioned that in particular, Dawson is the senior government affairs, I don't know, lobbyist, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I'm in charge of WSWA's government affairs operation.
So he knows what he's, I guess, talking about. But this is not really for discussion necessarily, but just to kind of give you an idea of where you know, medical and rec and the various products are permissible. But again, it was just more landscape-wise. So again, we talked a little bit about this, but some of the issues around the products, you know, you'll see them in the market, right? You'll see products that say CBD in the market, whether it's a CBD, you know, soda or water or candy or whatever, or you can order online. And, you know, while they may be available, they also, you know, are not getting caught, which is, it's a risk analysis, like most things are within, you know, the alcohol industry when you're trying to do things. And it's the same thing here. So a drug is obviously, as you can see here, something that, you know, specifically has these properties. And, you know, there are products in the market that are legal with hemp. So if you just said hemp seed oil and you didn't say it has CBD, although it may be naturally occurring, and you didn't say that it had any therapeutic properties, that would be much better than saying on your website or on your product, like, hey, this is going to make you sleep, which FDA may take more of a harder stance on. So again, now we're moving sort of into the alcohol setting of the stage. And TTB has a particular hemp policy. These are some of the current labels that include hemp. And TTB does require formulations, and then for you to prove that the hemp that's in your product was, you know, obviously 0.3% or less of THC. And you're not also allowed to basically make the claim that it has a controlled substance. So they take a hard stance when you have a marijuana leaf. I think the one in the new one actually just was hemp haze. There's, I think, 6 labels that are different flavors, and those are just approved last week. And it sort of looks like a flower, I think, to me. But I think you'd also make the argument, no, it's sort of just the design, I guess. But that's why they got it through, probably because there are, they're not really supposed to have products that suggest there's cannabis in terms of THC in there. So there is a way to get hemp-derived products with alcohol available, but I think what we're going to do going forward is kind of jumping into the future, what we're going to see with specifically THC or CBD. This is just to kind of give you, again, a little bit of an overview of where we're at, but alcohol consumption, according to these statistics anyway, is going down while cannabis consumption is going up. Of course, the volumes are much different, but and have you guys seen in your in market surveys, other than these are obviously statistical surveys, but just anecdotally, have you seen cannabis impact alcohol at all? Paul, have you noticed anything?
At least from our perspective, what we've seen is that there's almost zero effect on alcohol sales where cannabis becomes either medically or recreationally legal. It turns out that there is a black market for cannabis products. I'm sure everybody I know you're all shocked to hear about that, but it turns out that people who want cannabis products are able to find them somehow, some way. So while there appears to be a little bit of actual increase in cannabis usage, it's a relatively small fraction of overall cannabis usage. Tends to be a little bit more focused on the increase in cannabis use tends to look like people that look like me, older, not necessarily in your 20s, but that's where a lot of the cannabis increase is coming. That said, the alcohol purchasing and consumption is not fundamentally moving, although the channel of the consumption is. So in states where it's rec and or medical, I believe it's universally public consumption is not allowed, although of course there's movements in several states to change that. But if you can't enjoy your cannabis in public, you're going to be enjoying your alcohol in private. And so we see channel movement away from the on-premise alcohol consumption into the off-channel or off-premise alcohol consumption. So a lot of that's a little bit more anecdotal, but if you look at the sales numbers, it seems to be bearing out from what we're seeing. WSWA may have better numbers than that. And
yeah, Smoke, what do you think, anecdotally, and why don't you just give people a little bit of a background of how you got into the cannabis space, because you came from alcohol, so you have a good perspective on both.
Yeah, absolutely. So as the cannabis operator of our panel, my perspective, I think, is a little unique in that I was chairman of WSWA a long time ago, built a distribution business, and then a lot of my own brands. And when I just quickly give you just how I got in, I sold out of my last whiskey and vodka company. I had a brand called Beach Whiskey, which I created, and then American Harvest, which I bought from the Sidney Frank folks and relaunched. And I sold out of that, and my wife turned to me and said, "Before you do another liquor deal, we got to look at cannabis." Wasn't really a participant in the sport, and didn't really know anybody in it, since college days, and so I spent about 6 months kind of researching the industry, and clearly, anyone can see that, and even a couple of years ago, that this was going to be a huge category, and I was, kind of networking and looking at it, and kind of wondering, like, do I want to be the first, relatively known person in the alcohol space to jump in actually and do this officially? And while I was having that conversation with my family and friends, Constellation invested their first $198 million in Canopy growth, and that kind of answered the question for me. It's like, okay, if they're doing that, I can do this. So, so jumped in with both feet to vertical with which had been founded a couple years before, and we're basically doing large-scale supply chain, which means just to put it in normal terms, cultivation, extraction, manufacturing into brands and distribution. And and the reason we do it all, we're vertically integrated, which is not something you're pretty much allowed to do in alcohol, but it's something that we felt we had to do. Is if you want to create a brand, any kind of brand, like what's the number one thing that all brands have in common? I don't care what category they are, I don't care what industry it is. For me, it's consistency, right? It's you get what you expect. So whatever that brand is, it's the same every time. There's exceptions to that. If you buy a Chateau Lafite Rothschild, and one year it's a different year, it's different, a little different flavor, but it's still really good, right? And I think brands in general have to be consistent. And so if I wanted to create a new whiskey company today, I could call 10 people I know and they could make it for me exactly to my specs, my recipe. I could, there's a whole ecosystem, right, in the space that is well established. If I want to create a cannabis brand, who do you call? The guys that have been in it were criminals. They're not necessarily the best guys to call. And the guys that are now in it are new, or startups. The whole industry is a bunch of startups built on startups. So we're a startup, we're a large-scale startup, a couple hundred employees, and we're doing things in a bunch of states and at large scale, but we're still a startup. The people we buy from are startups, the people we sell to are startups, all the retailers, all of the dispensaries are new companies that are just getting going. And you know what, when the state of California, when they send the BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, people in to inspect us, those guys are startups, and we're teaching them what to look for. We're like, you really need to look at that because this is what this does, and they don't really know. By the way, if you need a job, that's a great, the Bureau of Cannabis Control is hiring, and they need people who don't know anything either. It's a great opportunity. But kind of circling back to the question about effect on, I think it's early days, right? Everybody thinks this stuff happens overnight, and the reality is, this is moving really fast. I mean, a couple years ago, I had my adult kids were like, "Dad, this is the coolest thing ever." But they thought I was cool in alcohol, and now they're like, "Cannabis is like the best thing you could ever do." I'm like, "That's great," but at the time we lived in Indiana, and I was like, "Well, let's have a cover story, because I don't know if Indiana's quite ready for this. So, when we go out to dinner, let's just say Dad's joining the avocado business, it's green, they got oil, it's California, it seems like a good cover." And so that was, and then 6 months later, I was on Fast Money on CNBC, and I did a whole interview there, and my phone was blowing up when I got off. It was my kids saying, "Dad, your cover's blown. They're not gonna believe the avocado story." But I mean, that's a really funny story, but like at the time, a couple years ago, it was like, I don't know if I really want everyone locally to know what I'm doing. That's kind of crazy today, right? That's changed dramatically, and it's moving really, really fast. And I liken it to gay marriage. When Obama went into office, he was against it. It was not going to be the law of the land. No one would say it was going to be the national rule. And now you'd say, of course it is, right? How quickly did that change? And I think we're at that moment here with cannabis. So I think it's early days in terms of predicting the effect on alcohol, but there's no question that the next generation, the Gen X and Gen Zs out there, are shifting their consumption habits. They're drinking less. It's certainly been showing up in the big beer, volume beer stuff, and that is not, part of that's shifting to wine and spirits, part of it's shifting to better beer, but part of that is also because they're drinking less and they're doing other things. They're choosing cannabis as a part of their portfolio of how they enjoy life. And it may not be as social, but it's something that is part of their menu. And I think as you get into more manufactured products, the flower thing, I agree. If you've been buying from Dimebag Donnie for 20 years, you're probably still buying from Dimebag. The black market is still alive and well across the country. But Dimebag Donnie didn't make a manufactured beverage that had low dose, that was fast acting, that you could drink 3 or 4 of and kind of have the same feeling that you had if you had 3 or 4 cocktails, right? That's not possible. It wasn't possible in the black market. And so what we're moving into this next phase is going to be branded goods that are made with a specific end in mind that's going to be much more accessible to mainstream consumers who wouldn't otherwise consume cannabis.
Fair enough. Again, these are just some statistics that are showing the growth of the beverage category within cannabis. And here again, Smoke, if you want to just give an overview of what you mean, like Two Roots, for instance, why don't you just share like what you mean by the low dose fast acting?
So, you know, I'm sure we all have stories where maybe, right, so how many people have tried an edible in the room?
Where it's legal.
You don't, I didn't ask that. I don't need to know if it was legal or not. It doesn't matter. How many people tried an edible, it didn't really kick in, so you had 8 more. And then you're like, oops. And by the way, there is one anecdote. There is something that can help with that if you ever experience this again, and that's CBD. So, well, we don't know exactly how it works, but CBD kind of floods the same receptors and it crowds out the THC. So if you ever have a friend who has too much and they're kind of freaking out, you know, a bunch of CBD can help kind of bring it back in line. So that's, you got one takeaway today, if nothing else, right? They're all like, all right, let's go get some edibles. No, but so that problem, right, that many of us have experienced is, you know, you try it and it takes an hour or 2 hours, sometimes longer to kick in. Depends on what you ate, depends on what, you know, a lot of the early edibles, you don't even know you don't want to know how they were making them. I mean, there were guys in Colorado like melting Starburst burst from the store and dumping THC in and then kind of reforming them. There's people like spraying stuff on. Not exactly the most sanitary manufacturing environments. I mean, there's a lot of like nastiness I've learned about. But all that being said, you're talking about a product that, you know, when it ingested, takes a long time to get through your bloodstream and actually kick in, and then it lasts a long time in your bloodstream. So really the holy grail of the consumable side of things is, how do I get something that if you're drinking a beer and you're drinking a cocktail and you're drinking a glass of wine and we're having an evening together and I pick up a low-dose THC-infused beverage, how do I make something that is fast-acting, so 15, 20 minutes after consuming it, about the same period of time that it takes for alcohol to kind of really kick in, I start feeling the effect, but it's not too much. It's like a low dose. So then you get another beer and I get another beverage, and as the night goes on, I'm kind of tracking alcohol. Now, if you get to that, that's what I'm talking about. That's a game changer, right? That's no calories, no hangover, a whole bunch of no's, right? Like a whole bunch of things that this is different than. And you know, I think that's a pretty magical thing. So that's what everybody who's serious about this is working towards. And whether that's a beverage or it's a edible or whatever, like things that will impact you quickly. Now that's what's nice about a vape, right? You hit a vape and you feel it right away. There's like tinctures that you have them in your gums. It goes right in your bloodstream faster.
Banaka type sprays now. And
there's sprays. There's little strips. You know, you can melt it like a Listerine strip that you can kind of have under your tongue. So there's lots of different delivery mechanism. And that's, I should just mention it. Like coming from the beverage business, you know, when I came out with a new brand, I had to decide like, all right, what am I doing? What flavor is it? What size bottles do I want to come out with? How many flavors do I want to have? You know, all these questions that are, you know, big questions for a brand. And now I'm in a space where there's like 100 different form factors, right? There's smokable, there's flower, there's vapes, there's, you know, there's dabs, there's food and beverages, there's, you know, lotions and topicals and medicinal side of things. So there's like just so many more ways you can consume this product that there's a lot more thought that has to go into how to do it. But again, I think that low dose, quick acting thing is really a game changer, and that's where it starts impacting all of us much faster in this space.
So now we're going to sort of jump into the future and you know, take educated guesses on where some of these things are going to happen, although they're happening in small amounts and in different pockets already. But Paul, why don't we start, because Paul's in Illinois, and Illinois just passed recreational. Some states do now have initiatives where you can, there's going to be, smokable hotels and bars where you can smoke and such. So why don't you kind of speculate where things are going in Illinois and elsewhere in terms of THC products being in bars? And you can expand it to CBD in terms of being in, bartenders using it in cocktails and THC in cocktails, and kind of open it up for that.
I think certainly the on-premise market for THC and CBD products is coming. Obviously, there are many bars out there currently with CBD in their cocktails and so on. New York, peace out on that one, but there are many other places using CBD as well. It's going to come, in particular with the fast-acting beverages that are coming. Society has trained all of us that you get together with your friends and with your family in celebrations and in commiserations by sharing beverages. You drink wine, you drink beer, you drink whiskey, you share a low-dose social lubricant consistently. The challenge for THC has been getting that in a way that somebody doesn't accidentally consume, 400 micrograms or milligrams, and all of a sudden they're a carpet. And that's not a pleasant experience. The secret weapon is getting into that 5 dose where you can have 3, 4 Two Roots beers and have effectively a mirror effect of having 3 or 4 whiskeys. And you can have them at the same time because you are not a carpet. You're an actual person who's able to talk to your friends and have a good time. That's how people celebrate. That is how people are going to get. The consumer always wins in this world because the people will deliver the consumer what they want, whether they know it or not quite yet. People will get THC on premise. It'll be some time, and I think that there will continue to be a little bit of a gap between beverage alcohol and beverage cannabis, because I think TTB is going to be a little bit behind the times on that. Ryan showed the TTB policy on that, but TTB got made, or feels like they got made to look like jerks about a year ago by a brewery in California, and they have rather overcompensated the other way and are making things very, very challenging to mix cannabis products and alcohol.
Well, to that point, obviously our government is well, you guys remember George Carlin, big fan? So, he had a thing, how stupid the average person is, right? Well, 50% of the people are stupider. Well, I think of that every time I talk about our government in different ways, and California is a great example. California, here's a state, they went like this to the federal government and said, you know what, we're gonna have marijuana, cannabis in whatever we want to do. You can make beverages, you can make food, you can make anything you want. I've got celebrities, I've got Trees by Game, the rapper. I got a billboard on 405 right down in LA, freaking big picture of Game, smoking his trees that we launched. So we got celebrities, we got live events. West Hollywood just approved the first open air consumable on-premise venue. Just got approved. So they've gone all the way to the extreme of this is fully mainstream, fully legal, and the federal government still says it's not. Then this whole Epidiolex thing happened. FDA, says, oh, we're in charge of CBD, so consumables are not yet approved. And the health department of California basically turned around and said, no CBD in anything. So here you have a state that already told the federal government, to do what with it, and on cannabis, but now you're not allowed to have CBD. It makes zero sense whatsoever. So now the legislature is about to pass a CBD bill in California that will expressly permit consumables in CBD throughout the state of California. So then, at least within California, they'll be consistently against the federal government. But it's just an indication of these agencies are not able to keep up with where this is going, and the FDA has a tremendous amount of pressure because these products are out there, right? Anybody can go on Amazon and you can order all kinds of stuff from CBD. You don't know if it's tested, you don't know what's in it, So we're for a regulated system that is provable, that you've tested it, that it's got what it says in. We want enforcement, we want it to be regulated. We're happy to have that kind of system, but you're not going to not permit it. And I just think it would be defy logic if Mitch McConnell, who forced the hemp bill into the farm bill last year and is very much in favor of helping his Kentucky farmers, to not get the #1 demanded outcome of hemp approved for use in the general population. It makes 0 sense, right? So I think they're under a lot of pressure to permit it.
Well, Dawson, what do you think? Because you also have an issue of, your members perhaps having issues with THC or CBD in bars. So what's your perspective?
So a couple things there. And first, I'd like to say that I think one of the things we have to be careful is not to underestimate the evolutionary process that's going to happen, and that it's going to ebb and flow, right? Because we've seen this. If you go back to 1934, I think we all kind of like to think about the alcohol market as the way the alcohol market is, but it wasn't always that way. And I mean, it's a perfect example. Kansas legalized liquor by the drink in 1992. So before 1992, you couldn't buy a cocktail in a bar in the state of Kansas.
Dawson, I'm still not moving to Kansas. Nice try.
But that's, you're going to see the same thing. You're going to see states do this in a different order. You're also going to see, there are states that have tightened regulations as much as they have loosened them in the alcohol space in the last 85 years. You're going to see the same thing. The pendulum is going to waver back and forth, but with an overall trend towards giving the consumer what they want. What Ryan was just mentioning is, we have an issue that is it's a pretty big conflict for our members, right? So CBD products are the place where it shows up the most. Just all of our members have federal basic permits that have a clause in it that basically say you have to be a law-abiding citizen. And there's a lot of concern that if they go carry CBD products, that while they might be state legal and currently it might be legal under the Farm Bill by one reading, that they could be putting their permit at risk because the FDA might be saying that those products are not legal, utilizing CBD in the right way. And then secondarily is, if you look further down the road, it's the same issue with distributing if there are THC infused beverages, right? It makes perfect sense if those products are going to be consumed in the same setting as alcoholic beverages to have them on the same truck. And not all of our members might want to get into that business, but right now none of them have the option because the risk to their permit for carrying a federally illegal product. So there's a lot of thorniness around this, and I agree with what Smoke said. And in fact, Leader McConnell was just in speaking to FDA last week, talking about the need to get some clarity around CBD. But I'll also say bureaucracies and the FDA is as bad a bureaucracy as there exists in Washington. Bureaucracies are bureaucracies. So I guess going back to the original point, I think it is important for us not to assume that because something doesn't happen today, that it's not going to happen tomorrow, and vice versa, that because something is happening today, that's going to continue to be the regulatory structure for the next 100 years.
But do your members want to prohibit THC or CBD for as long as possible because they're worried about the down?
Not at all.
No.
No, our members' view is, in particular, what our members are concerned about is the THC containing products, those that impair. We think those have the most analogous features to alcohol. And we do believe that products containing THC, whether they are smoked, rubbed, drank, eaten, whatever the consumption factor is, that those products should be regulated in a way that has parity with alcohol. That there should be similarities. We think there are a lot of lessons that we learned in the last 85 years on alcohol. It's why our regulations have evolved, and that a lot of those can be used as the basis for the THC regulations. We recognize CBD is a completely different animal, and this is one of the things that makes cannabis and alcohol so different, right? Alcohol, whether it's beer, wine, or spirits, the alcohol is that molecule in it that creates the impairment. Cannabis is a plant that has hundreds, if not thousands, of components, one of which happens to impair. Others have, a variety of properties that might be used otherwise. So,
Ryan, I would say in terms of resistance, because I spent some time, taking a hat, my page out of my days at WSWA, and we passed a couple of laws in Congress when I was chairman, and so I knew how to do it. Certainly better than the cannabis guys, you got to, and everyone's like, well, why are you meeting with McConnell? Why are you meeting with all the Republicans? Because they're the ones that we need to convince. The other guys are already kind of on board. So I just met with people that needed to hear the message of what we're trying to do. I think the interesting thing is, Illinois is the first state that's passed recreational cannabis use that's gone through the legislature and had a governor sign it. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason New Jersey and New York failed. New Jersey is home to 14 of the top 25 pharmaceutical companies in the world. And if you don't think that behind the scenes, the lobbyists are doing delay tactics and anything they can to get in the way of this, that's who the common enemy is in this space. We're not seeing anybody in alcohol at this stage, maybe 5 years ago, maybe years before, definitely, but I think that today, everyone looks at it as an opportunity. Yes, a threat, but an opportunity more. Your biggest members, a couple of your biggest members already are in the business in Canada, right? So they've already done it in a legal place. But behind the scenes, the reason the legislative efforts keep failing is those pharma guys are fighting it. And when it gets on a ballot, it passes, because majorities of the entire country are now in favor of this. And even if you go to age groups, older populations in favor, you go to Republican conservatives, more than 50% are in favor of at least medical use of cannabis throughout the country. So at the end of the day, the reason this is an interesting topic, the reason that I'm in this space, the reason that Walmart, Target, all these guys are getting ready to put CBD in, that everybody cares about it, is because there's a lot of consumer interest. The public wants this, and it's gonna happen.
Oh, what are you saying?
Yeah, I was also going to point out that we've talked a little bit about the challenges that we all have on the supplier side, distributor side. We also shouldn't overlook challenges that are going to be coming up at the on-premise side as well. We can all have a good time and laugh about THC and cannabis, but there are downsides to it, and you can't test for cannabis intoxication the same way you can alcohol. So if you are a bar owner and you are serving a THC beverage or a CBD beverage, and your person goes out and is impaired driving, how are you measuring those risks, and what products are going to get blamed for it? There are some real challenges that are going to cause real headaches for an awful lot of people.
That's been like a lot of these regulator meetings I go to. The regulators are always saying that it's an issue because it's easier to test for alcohol than cannabis. You do a portable breathalyzer or do the full one at the precinct, and you're going to get the alcohol. And so even if they are just above legal limit, but maybe they're like smoking 2 joints and are really blowing out more from that, it's going to blame alcohol versus cannabis, and that was always sort of their hesitancy.
The only thing I would say to that, look, if I took a bunch of guys in a room and I gave them unlimited alcohol, there might be a fight, someone might die if they drink too much. If I did the same group of people and I gave them unlimited cannabis, someone might pull a muscle from laughing, and they all are going to fall asleep in each other's arms. So let's be real here. Yes, it's an issue, but let's not blow that out of proportion. This is a much less harmful product. And my family, we've made a lot of money in the alcohol business. We still have interest in the space. I'm a drinker, I'm a fan, but let's not kid ourselves. That is a totally different threshold of the damage this thing does. And look, it's a problem. We got to figure out ways to test, but it's not bigger than that.
But I think that the driving issue, and it's one that a lot of policymakers, members of Congress, spend a lot of time talking about, and it's a real one. And I think that there are some folks, not necessarily smoke, but some folks in the cannabis industry that like to make the joke, right? Oh, you're a better driver because you drive slower. I'm sorry, but if your reaction time is delayed, and the kid runs out in front of your car, if you hit them going 20 or 45, you're still hitting a kid. And so, you know, the issue is that if you are impaired and your, you know, motor faculties are impaired, that has a real impact on what you're doing on the roads. And so the impaired driving issue is one I will frankly say that the alcohol industry took too long to take seriously back in the 50s and 60s, and that when we came to the table and worked, you know, with regulators, we've now gotten to a place where impaired driving accidents are at or near all-time lows, and that I think for the cannabis industry, they'd be wise to focus on that now rather than waiting for it to become a problem down the road.
Couldn't agree more.
And just to kind of jump ahead even further into the future, how do you guys think the new psychedelic movement, where, you know, certain cities are now legalizing it, do you think that's going to be the next wave, or is that, you know, going to impact cannabis and make things even more difficult because now we're trying to get, you know, get everything legal? Or what do you guys think about that, Paul?
I think it's really too early to have any great ideas on how it's all going to go down. I don't think it's going to go down the same way as cannabis has, primarily based on a number of people who care. I think there's an awful lot more people that enjoy cannabis than boomers. Certainly there's people here that I'm sure enjoy mushrooms, but it's, you know, up to you and your doctor, not me.
By show of hands.
It's legal in New Zealand, I think. But, you know, I think that it will come. I just don't think that there is the driving body of people that want it to happen. It will, but I think it'll just be a little bit slower.
Dawson, have you heard of anything going on at all, like from a legislative perspective?
No, I think those are reflective of the population within those couple of cities. I mean, I will say it is part of this, you know, there's a trend towards just sort of permissiveness and normalization of a variety of different things that 10 or 15 years ago nobody would have anticipated. But I agree. I think, you know, just go back to my college days. I had a lot of friends that consumed cannabis. A smaller group consumed mushrooms. A smaller group consumed cocaine. And you know, as each one of those groups becomes smaller, the movement for people to try and legalize it just loses its momentum.
I think there's some interesting, I saw a presentation down in Cape Town earlier this year. There's a lot of studies happening using MDMA and other of these substances combined with therapy that are proving to be very, very effective, especially specifically with PTSD and working with veterans or not just veterans, anyone with PTSD from whatever it was caused, but helping them get through those issues in a way that's different. And that, you know, that ties into, to me, you know, one of the biggest advocates for legalization of cannabis is the veteran community. And, you know, I have a lot of veteran friends, and one in particular came back, the Marine, and came back from Afghanistan paralyzed, and you know, he had 4.5 pounds of cement put into his back, and he's you know, functional, but he was in such severe pain. They prescribed him. He looked like what a 78-year-old, you know, cancer patient might get. I mean, his medicine cabinet was full of medicine, and the combination of these drugs, they don't even know, but it's helping cause 22 suicides a day, right, with the veteran community. And he discovered cannabis kind of by accident and got off all these meds and is not suicidal anymore, and he's spreading the word. But that community is a huge advocate. But if you're a veteran and you are in a state like California where it's absolutely legal within the state, and you get tested and caught, you can lose all your benefits for the VA. I mean, that kind of doesn't make sense, right? So,
yeah, I think you just touched on something that's going to be really interesting, and that is that there's no doubt that cannabis and all its components have you know, a lot of reported medical benefits, right? But we have this problem that the research is incomplete because of its legal status. And I think one thing we do know is going to happen is there's going to be expanded research on cannabis, and then the federal government is going to be stuck with a problem, because it's going to be really the first product that is widespread used recreationally that tries to become a FDA regulated medicine versus the other way around. And the law isn't set up to handle that, right? Because once, as we saw with Epidiolex, once something becomes a medicine, it falls into this whole other category where the FDA doesn't want to have it just out there. So that's going to be a really interesting place to watch, and I think that it's going to take a lot of really deep thought by the folks that are doing that research on, you know, how they conduct their studies to determine, you know, where the lines are between, you know, prescribed medical use and recreational use.
I wanted to stop for a bit to see if we have any questions so far, because, you know, we don't have to wait until the end. Does anybody have questions before we? Yes.
The research that's done, is there any interaction between marijuana and THC that people are looking into, like does one amplify the other?
You mean between THC and alcohol?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, so the question was, is there any research showing that interaction between cannabis and alcohol? And, you know, what I've seen is that they kind of amplify each other. So if you consume them together, the cannabis has an amplified effect, so you get more stoned, right, the THC, and the alcohol takes longer to process in your body, so it's a longer, you know, it takes a lot longer, so it lasts a lot longer. And so there's nobody that's saying that's a good thing to do, right? Certainly no one in the legitimate industry. There's certainly people that do both, but you know, there's not enough studies that, you know, kind of really prove out one way or the other.
Is your question?
Well, I have a comment on that because there was just an article published. Can you hear me? There was just an article published that after some major testing that ingesting alcohol first will open up your blood vessels and cause you to cause a facilitation of a much greater influx of the THC quicker. And reversely, if you have THC first, your body behaves differently, and the absorption, like you were just saying, is slow. So, but that's actually a published study.
Okay.
I'm happy to send it to you.
I've done that study in college, and
Yeah.
they're absolutely.
My kids call it CrossFit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a number of bars and coffee shops that do CBD cocktail or CBD coffee, and I haven't seen the studies in particular. I don't know if you guys have.
No, the only thing I can say is that, you know, the number one characteristic of this plant is it fights inflammation. And, you know, what CBD does is it helps fight inflammation and it takes some of the edge off the pain off, right? So, I don't know if there's any studies that say, you know, I know on an Advil bottle it says don't drink and take Advil, but pretty sure everyone in the room has taken Advil and had a drink, right? So there's definitely interactions between medicine and alcohol. The CBD is something that is widely used right now in the population. There's a lot of people already taking it, right? And we have not seen any adverse effects reported anywhere. The only thing negative that I've seen is in the Epidiolex study, they would say fed like rats or other animals massive doses of CBD. They had some liver damage, but they were giving these guys, tons and tons of the stuff. And
Part of it, though, in terms of coffee and cocktails, you see is, I think, partially marketing, where you charge more, and it doesn't all the time say how much CBD is in it. You know, it's a floater of a little drop of CBD, so they charge $5 more for a coffee or something. So from that perspective, there's, you know, not responsibility, but some responsibility for the consumer, or, you know.
I would say a couple of things. You know, and one of those is, you know, I think from the studies we've seen, you're very direct. The directness of your question is that no, alcohol and CBD don't have this. I've not seen any studies that show a same amplifying effect. I think, you know, given sort of the theme of this, where we are here, and the interest in CBD, you know, I think that CBD has a big place as an ingredient in the cocktail culture in the future, because there's so much interest in adding it to all your drinks. What he was just touching on is the other thing that I think we're going to see a backlash at some point, because companies like Smokes are doing it right? It's the same thing every time, and they're getting quality CBD. There's a lot of CBD products on the market that aren't necessarily regulated very well. How much and what the quality of the CBD in what you're getting is
and the filler,
unknown,
right?
It's just unknown, and so, you know, I think that there's a good chance that at some point, if people start to see it as not a quality product, you'll see a consumer reaction to that.
The Hemp Council, which is a bunch of folks that are in the industry, have gotten together, and there's now a hemp approved, or little logo that's starting to show up on things. We're doing our testing and third-party labs and publishing those, where you can look at the QR code and go to the website. You can see the testing results of that particular product. And a big part of our story is, seed to sale. I bought the seeds that we planted in our farmers' land. We have 2,500 acres of hemp growing right now that will turn into hundreds of millions of dollars of CBD later when I process it. And so we have a visibility line of sight of our product from the beginning. And a lot of this stuff in New York, these guys were just adding stuff in their bar. Where are they getting that isolate? And a lot of this isolate, is probably coming from China. I have nothing against my phone from China, but I don't really want to drink it. Food products, and they do make a lot of food products, but I have no problem selling against those guys.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the legality of putting CBD in a cocktail at your bar, and recommended doses if it is regulated.
The legality, is that what the question was?
Yeah.
It's state by state. It's kind of gray area. The FDA is saying no. Certain states are saying yeah. That's the crazy thing. I'll go back to California. You can go to a dispensary in California and buy a beverage, and as long as the CBD came from cannabis, that has THC in it, it's legal. And at the moment you go to an Erewhon or some other store and you buy a CBD beverage, it's technically not legal at the moment. So it just makes no sense. But
because New York and California and Massachusetts and a number of states have specifically outlawed CBD.
Yeah, it's legal, but it varies.
Okay. Well, in Florida, CBD is illegal technically because the definition of CBD generally, the definition of a controlled substance in Florida includes hemp CBD, but obviously federally it does not, so there's a conflict. So Florida has said that they're not going to prosecute that or go after those things. So even though they're not going to go after it, you see it everywhere in Florida. It's kind of a risk analysis. If you're at a bar, one bar, versus seeing it, in 7-Elevens all over the state, it's probably a different risk analysis for, a bartender versus a company putting it everywhere, right? So, obviously, can't really provide specific legal.
What about recommended dosage per drink?
I don't know that. I don't know if any of you guys do.
So we're facing that a lot because we're putting it into a lot of different products, and we're not sure. We're experimenting. We're on a guinea pig, so we're trying it ourselves. So at least there's that. Right? None of us have really had an adverse effect.
Dosing is always a challenge, especially in CBD, because everybody says it's a medicine or it's a drug, but nobody knows what the effective dose is. Is the effective dose 5? Is it 20? Is it 25? Is it 100? So if you're trying to do a cocktail at a bar, what's the dose?
The problem is
so we have little mints and strips that we sell right now in convenience stores, and they're 10 milligrams a piece. And if you're of CBD, yeah, you can't. And I think that's a good starting dose. You can definitely feel it if you don't have a tolerance built up. You can definitely feel the effect. And the nice thing is about that form is you can take 2, right? You take one, kind of see how you're feeling, take another one, and you kind of pop them throughout the day. I think I don't know what the dosage is, but you're talking about
much higher,
massive,
yeah.
like 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams in a dose, of that medicine.
Most of the consumer products you see in CBD that are beverages that you see are 5 or 10 initially.
I know I had bought a
2B bottle, they said the daily recommended dose was like 500 milligrams for just like the whole day. But like, I was gonna drink, but I was just wondering like.
The other thing is the format matters, right? Because there's different formats that get absorbed differently, and some stuff kind of, a higher dose isn't necessarily getting in your bloodstream as much as a lower dose that's in a format that gets in your bloodstream, right? So there's a lot of technology coming, and just milligrams is not actually, it's not like proof or, you know, it's a different thing, right? So no one really knows. We're in the business and we're learning. My chief scientific officer starts August 1st, so maybe he'll tell us what I'm selling out there. It's true.
Were there any other questions before we? Oh, yeah.
So I'm a distiller in California, and I know I can't add it into my product and sell it. Can I experiment with it? Can I start working with it? What are the rules for someone like me in that situation?
I'd say your basic permit is on the line if you have anything that is plant related on your premises. I'm not your lawyer. Brian's probably not your lawyer either, but the answer is I would stay, pardon my French, but I'd stay the fuck away.
I would do it at your home distillery kitchen.
So you're
no, seriously, like you can do whatever you want at home. So like I would play around with it if I were, you know.
I'm a distiller, but I certainly would never have anything plant related anywhere near my bonded premises. What you do at home is kind of, well, I'm not your lawyer.
So here we were just sort of talking about the impact on alcohol in the future, and we sort of went through this, but I think, Paul, do you see generally, because you are the representative distiller here, in 5 to 7 years, a decline in your overall sales because of, let's say, you know, federal prohibition ends?
I don't think our alcohol sales are going to go down in the slightest based on cannabis legalization, period. I think that you can look at sales figures across beverage alcohol, and beer and wine are losing ground, but they're losing ground to spirits. Go spirits. But I don't think we're going to get anything. I don't think beverage or spirit sales are going to go down in the slightest based on cannabis at all. There may be changes in market, there may be changes in channel, but.
You know, my only difference in what you said, I agree with premium branded spirits. I don't think it's really going to make much of an impact. But I think at the volume price, lower price products, you've got a young generation who is choosing to shift a bit, right? And so look, if you're going to want a great whiskey and you sit around in your yard and enjoy it, that's not going to change. But, you know, I think there's a generational thing that's happening, and you know, I think at the margin it will affect, just as Bud Light is declining, you know, a couple points a year. It's tiny, but it's giant volume shifting. I think that's true of like the lower price stuff.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
That's a better way of saying it. You know, we don't play around in plastic jug territory at Few. Everybody knows the brand. You realize we don't play in plastic jugs. I don't think that at the high end we're going to get hit. Plastic jugs may see some damage, but I think they're already seeing that. I would not per se attribute that to cannabis. I would attribute that to generally people drinking less volume at higher qualities. And I think you'll see that in cannabis too, with people smoking less dirt weed and enjoying much more vertical.
I don't know, dirt weed's pretty popular.
So, you know, obviously all of us are in the alcohol beverage industry, and we understand that we have a 3-tier system. You know, the supplier sells to the wholesaler to the retailer, you know, bar, restaurant, liquor store. Dawson, why don't you just sort of talk through, you know, Smoke's on the one side where he wants everything vertical because he wants consistency, he wants to watch seed to sale, he wants to do all these things, whereas your members are like, well, we want the same as alcohol, and we want a 3-tier system so that Southern can make a lot more money. And all the other wholesalers, obviously. So, you know, can you just talk to the, you know, I guess why your members are pushing that so much, where, you know, Smoke's on the other side and saying, well, we should have.
Yeah, so I mean,
and where's it going to end up?
I'm not going to say that a purely vertically integrated market is, can't be done and successfully for Smoke's company, right? Because it can't. For a company, when you look at the overall marketplace, we believe that the beverage alcohol space in the United States is stronger because you have a three-tier system. That we have consistency, if you, whatever it is, Johnny Walker or Jack Daniels are pretty consistent. And they are consistent because you do have a licensed and regulated supply chain. I believe that there is and WSW believes there's a limit to, how effective and big a brand can get if it remains only vertically integrated and doesn't sell at any retailer that it doesn't own. One of the benefits of the three-tier system is that while folks might complain that sometimes they have trouble getting distribution, the fact is that there is shelf space because there's a distributor putting products on those shelves. And if there was vertical integration, there would be no shelf space except for those vertically integrated products. So at a basic level, once you get interstate commerce, once the federal government acts and these products are moving across state lines, a model similar to what happens in alcohol makes a lot of sense, and that is where producers and distributors are licensed by the federal government and retail is licensed at the state level. There is vertical integration within the alcohol space. Just look at brew pubs, look at tasting rooms for distilleries, look at tasting rooms for wine. There's room for that, for those things, and we have found that room in the alcohol space. But the general principle of a separation and a regulated distribution tier, it actually helps protect the brands, it helps protect the shelf space.
A lot of on the cannabis side, they want it to be optional. So, if I don't want to have my own trucks to get to all the different dispensaries, because I don't want my own dispensaries, I don't want to sell to other people. I want the ability, because maybe I'm in a big state like California, I don't want to do it, but I don't want to be required to do it by...
One of the fundamental things that the three-tier system does, and having an independent distribution tier, is also, if you all remember and all are aware of, all of the regulations surrounding trade practices. Those are the things that create competition on the retail shelf, right? And those regulations can't exist if you don't have a regulated three-tier system, because it's that separation that prevents the alliance between the largest retailer and the largest supplier to shut out the smaller brands. It prevents the large retailer from dominating the entire marketplace. It prevents the large supplier from dominating the entire marketplace. Yes, do they still have a huge amount of say? Obviously, but because of their buying power. But the fact is that having a three-tier system actually makes the U.S. market the one reason there are more brands on the shelves here than anywhere else in the world.
Smoke, what is your thought, given that you have been in both?
Yeah, and we're not. I'm not against a three-tier system. In fact, I'm kind of against the fully vertically integrated model. Like, if you look at the way Florida did it, that makes no. I get why they did it, but it doesn't really seem like a really sustainable thing. Like, where you have to grow, extract, distribute, and then retail all of your own brands. You can't sell to anyone else. That's not a very good. I don't like that system at all.
Right. If
We're
there's
not
expertise in retail and also expertise in manufacturing, maybe you're actually really good at one and not the other.
Well, it's more than that. I mean, we're creating brands, and in California, we do have a distributor tier. It's just allowed to be owned by other people, but the taxes are collected at the distributor tier. It very much parallels the beverage alcohol space, except for the ownership question. But Gallo has their own distributor in California. AB has a bunch of their own distributors in California. So on the supply side, there is already those two tiers are integrated in lots of parts of the country, some more than others. What we've chosen not to get into retail because I don't want to compete with my customers. So I want my brand to be on every shelf in every store in California. And if I'm a big retailer, they're going to look at me as a competitor. So, you're not going to see MedMen, the brand MedMen, their own private label sold at all the other retailers because they look at them as a competitor. So we've chosen to kind of separate, but yeah, we are growing, extracting, manufacturing, and then distributing because we have to. Gallo doesn't grow all their own grapes today, but they still grow grapes. But they buy grapes from a lot of people. Again, today it's such an early phase in our ecosystem development that you can't necessarily rely on who's out there. Like, there's not enough established players. Down the road, I'm happy to buy from other people. I mean, if they're better at it than I am. The same thing on the hemp side. We're producing, we're growing 2,500 acres right now because we know that we have a large demand for product. We want to have control of where it's coming from, and we're going to put that into brands. And the brands are going to take a long time to build, but we know we have a steady stream of supply. Down the road, we may be buying from other people. And that's a space where if I wanted to, I could be a distributor and I could also be a retailer, but I don't want to be a retailer. The last thing I want to be is a retailer. Is there any retailers in here?
What do you think? Would you prefer cannabis to be a 3-tier or,
Well,
non-3-tier?
coming at the issue from the perspective of a small distiller, the 3-tier system has been proven to work for small brands. It is because of the independent retail and independent middle tier that a small brand like Few can exist, period, hard stop. If there wasn't an independent step, the large suppliers would dominate the entire industry to such an extent that small brands simply would not exist. So from my perspective, I certainly enjoy and respect the 3-tier system. I think there's an awful lot that the cannabis space can learn from it. As a personal kind of avowed libertarian, I'm not necessarily in favor of government enforcing such a thing, but it's also true that the nature of life is such that government enforcement of such a thing actually works to protect the consumer and ensure that the consumer has access to choice. The 3-tier system works. At least for alcohol, and I just don't think there's any reason to think it won't work for cannabis.
Thank you.
What if I do? and Paul has basically summed up what WSWA, I don't know if you're paying him, but that's basically exactly what he said. And Smoke, you said this before, but I think the biggest problem from a national perspective for cannabis is consistency, because even if you have the same strain in California and the same strain when Illinois is legal, it may, because of the grow, may be actually different. So if you bought your product in California and then bought the same brand and product in Illinois, it may in fact affect you slightly differently. So do you see in the future, like when in the future do you see consistency within cannabis being to the point where you can buy Budweiser and it's the same in every state?
Yeah, well, we're just trying to see if you can get the same brand in the same state, the same every time to start with, right? Like, we're really early days here. But first of all, like 5 years ago in California, 95% of the sales were flower, right? The smokable flower, traditional way. Today it's 50%. And the other 50% is either, it's extracts, and it's either vapes or it's edibles or beverage, other form factors. In 5 years, we expect your flower to be closer to 15%. Not because it's going to decline, but because we expect all the other types to grow, right? I think the same amount of flower or more is going to be sold, but you're going to see all these other form factors, creating a much bigger market, much more mainstream, much more, accessible. So as you get into manufactured products that are branded, then you can be consistent if you follow the recipes, follow the manufacturing process, right? The flower is more like a kind of a boutique thing, right? Like if you're growing for a specific strain, yeah, you can take that strain and grow it somewhere else. It may be the same, but it's very much. There's a lot more variability to it. But once you take the oil out, it's a manufactured product. It's just you can make the same thing anywhere.
But is it important to take the oil from the same plant in the same place to be able to then transport it to?
No, because once you extract, you're getting the cannabinoids, right? So you're getting THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids that are in the plants, 150 or so, and we're only scratching the surface on what these other ones do. But once you take that out, it's a molecule. It doesn't matter which plant it came from. the thing that makes sativa up and indica down, or sleepy, is the terpenes, right? Which you can add back in terpenes that are extracted from not just cannabis, but from fruits and other plants have terpenes. So I think you think about like a flavor house. What a flavor house does, if you're creating a beverage and you want it to have a certain flavor, the flavor house is going and they're creating that flavor in a shelf-stable format that won't separate. A year from now will still be in the bottle the right way. And that's kind of the way that we look at it from a being consistent from a manufacturing standpoint. And so I think you're going to see, consistency of brands once you get out of the flower more.
So here on the left, well, let's see, your left. No, yeah, your left. Those were sort of the after the repeal of prohibition, the reasons, or some of the reasons that the three-tier system was put into place was to avoid the excess of and the Tide House was as well, was to avoid the pre-prohibition evils and to keep the criminal elements out and regulate labeling and packaging and so forth, and ultimately all of those things to protect the consumer. So I think at the end of the day, the cannabis industry, is ultimately going to have to go in that direction to protect their consumer. And so I think what Smoke's saying is that he's all in favor of making sure that the products are safe at the end of the day and tested, and that's why he is doing all the things he's doing with the vertical integration and all the testing.
Well, I'll even add one bit to that, which is, you get a lot of people complaining in California about everything, but about the taxes and the regulatory structure. And yeah, California overdid it on taxing to start with. They should have had a lower tax, because we still have a very thriving black market in California that needs to be squished. But the testing, I think they got right. It's really difficult. It makes it really hard for people. But they need to do a campaign, and they're starting to do little bits of it. But they need to do a big campaign like California Raisins or Got Milk or whatever. But it's like, this is what we're testing for in the legal cannabis system, and this is what is in Dimebag Donnie's weed that you've been buying. And if there's a thing called Eagle 20 that is like, all the growers use this stuff. It's apparently harmless on blueberries if you consume it. It doesn't sound very good to me, but it's apparently doesn't hurt you if you just consume it. But if you burn it, it's a carcinogen. And it's on all of the black market flour. Now, the fact that we're testing, the state of California is requiring, doesn't allow any of that to be on it, makes perfect sense. We're also testing for salmonella and mold and all kinds of other things that you do not want to put in your body, and that's what's in the illegal products that are out there. And so that's part of being, as this industry matures, you're not going to want to buy from the guy on the street because you know that you don't know what's in it. And remember, I got some of the pushback on Capitol Hill from some of the conservative lawmakers who said, what do I say to my constituents, when they say this is a gateway drug? And my response is, it's a gateway drug because you make them buy it from a drug dealer. And the drug dealer has something else to sell them. So you think about, it's not just what's in the product itself, it's also what else are they putting in it to get you onto something else. So it's very good for society to clean this up, regulate it, and tax it. And that's part of a regulated system, which all of the responsible players are very much for. But it's a tough.
Yeah, I just say it is a tough transition because the product is so readily available on the black market, right? And so one of the things as you get into a place where when eventually the federal government takes their cut of the taxes and all the states have their cut of the taxes and maybe some states have local taxes, you're going to have a concern about not just the black market product that's out there, but about black market product that could be marketed as legal product, right? It's the counterfeit. And once we get brands that are recognized, that's part of the benefit of what we have in the alcohol space, is that is mostly unheard of in the United States.
And that's happening today.
Right.
Already.
And you contrast that, right? So I talk to a lot of people talk about this one because it's in the news. But Juul, right now, you can go to reputable convenience stores and buy a Juul that's counterfeit from China. And it's because they they haven't figured out the same sorts of controls and making sure that they're only buying from the right regulated system. And really, we view that as one of the benefits of the way the alcohol system works, and why so many of the lessons from it can move over to cannabis to try and replicate that.
Yeah, so I have perfect timing because I've allocated the last bit.
So in thinking about that, when we think about other countries, like the Netherlands, that it's been legal for a long time, and other countries, what is there, is there any kind of like model that we can take from those countries to look at, how to make it or how to regulate it or how to tax it that they've had success with or failed with? I mean, how do they regulate the amount of THC or CBD in the products for their consumers?
It's regulated, but it's kind of quasi-regulated, and it was in these little. They kept it in certain shops, that you could go into. There's no thriving model that you can look at. Canada is the first big country to do it fully adult use, but all they allowed was flower. There was no edibles, no extracts, and there's no branding. Like I can't send Game up there to do a promotion because Game ain't allowed to be promoting weed, and so you get the generic packaging, no branding, flower only. Canada is not necessarily the example. I think Colorado is probably, if I had to hold up a state that's done it right the most ways, Colorado is probably the best example. They have a uniform tax. They allow local options, so if a city or county doesn't want to have it, they don't have to have it, but if they do, they get a portion of the state tax revenue sent to them. They have a pretty competitive retail market, right? So there's thriving, it's not limited license where you got some guys with political influence getting one of a set number of licenses. It's more open than that. And they now have a wholesale model, which is starting to kind of build up. So I think that's a pretty good example. They pretty much squished the black market. The black market is, I wouldn't say it's gone, but it's like it's virtually non-existent. California, on the other hand, got a lot of things right, but they taxed it so much, and they have 3 agencies, and it's been such a hard transition, and the black market is so entrenched. It's going to take a long time, and until they really enforce, it's going to take a while. But there's not really a good example out there because no one's really done it at the level that we're doing it now in the States.
Yes, sir.
Going back to the 3-tiered system, and this is an oversimplification, so please go along with that. I can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy copper tubing, okay, but I'm not going to be able to come up with a high-quality spirit if I don't know what I'm doing. But I can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy a tomato plant and grow damn good tomatoes, okay? Other than the process, the edibles, and those products, how would the 3-tier system work when I can grow my own product at home, as I'm sure many people in here do, and that's not going to be in that system?
Well,
I would say you can, and I have brewed pretty good beer at home, and I have friends that made pretty good wine at home. But and I think as we get further from a purely black market for cannabis to a legal market from cannabis, fewer people will be interested in growing their own product. Partially because people like smoke are going to do a lot of research and come up with really high quality products. Second, most people aren't going to want to smoke it because you're not going to be able to smoke it in public. They're going to want to consume edibles or tinctures or whatever all those other forms are. And then lastly is really, it's because at the end of the day, the brands are going to be accepted and in a way that your home brew isn't, just like your brands are accepted.
And I think you're also potentially oversimplifying the expertise involved, right? So like I'm sure everybody, well, most people or some people have friends who've grown, weed in a closet or something, but it's not going to be at the same level that Smoke's doing with people who are, day in and day out attending to the plant, using all of the proper lighting, and going to have a much better product. I mean, you spend all the time trying to grow it like a tomato plant, but you can go to a dispensary and buy a professionally made product for $10 a gram, same as moonshine. Like you can make some crappy, bathtub gin or go buy Paul's that he's, you know, done as a professional for $30 or whatever, well, 45 now or something, but, you know what I mean? So I don't know that that's necessarily.
But there's a market, there's a mechanism for that, right? Like in most of these states, they will allow you to have a certain number of plants.
Right.
And if you're not trying to sell it to somebody, who cares? Like, grow away, have a fun time at your grow. I mean, it's just if you're trying to go sell it to the market and the inner commerce that I think that's where you've got to have a regulated system.
Sure.
But if you want to grow something for yourself and you're really good at it, then you know you got a bunch of people that want to come over probably.
And I'll actually tell you, I grow really good jalapenos, and I still buy jalapenos because I don't have a huge patch of jalapenos, right? Everybody I know that grows tomatoes, they buy
You
tomatoes.
learn something new every day. Right? You grew jalapenos.
Does anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
So like in drinks, you kind of see this trend towards like lower ABV and like mid-proof. So in cannabis, like is there any development happening for like lower strength products or like lower strength strains, or do you think that's just going to come from more stringent dosing and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we got both.
Trend, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, so the question was, is there a similar trend to what we're seeing is like lower strength alcohol, like White Claw, right? Things that are like lower proof that people are, you know, it's becoming more popular. Is there similar across cannabis? And I would say that both. You've got extracts. Like we just launched a product called Caviar, which is like, it's like weed with keef, which is like rolled on it, and oil, and this stuff is like, I mean, first of all, I'm a lightweight. I can drink all night with you, but I take one hit of that, I'll be out. Like, where's smoke? You sleep until tomorrow. Like, it wouldn't be something I would do. But there's an audience for that. There's, you know, like in some of the strains now, and just through breeding and more professional growing, are getting up there, you know, 25, 28% and higher THC. That's not like the weed that Ryan used to have back in college before law school. You know, it's a whole different era. Now, at the same time, in our manufactured products, as I said before, you know, people are looking for, you know, to take the edge off. They're not looking to be like out of their mind and in a couch. They're looking to like just take the edge off, and as opposed to, you know, so low dose mints, low dose beverages, low dose, all kinds of low dose things. Those are killing it. I mean,
yeah, the microdosing. I mean, there's the two routes, and the other non-alcoholic beers are all microdose, 2.5 milligram THC or 5 milligram THC, and in a lot of dispensaries in, you know, California or whatever, 2.5 milligram, even 1 milligram THC, or, you know, 2 and 2 THC CBD. So I think it's a big trend.
Yeah, and when you have it with CBD as well, again, like the same way as an anecdote to overdoing it, if you take like a mint that has like 1:1 or 1:5 ratio, and you've got a substantial amount of CBD with your THC, you don't get like super high, like the high where you're not really functional. You just get the edge off, and it kind of balances out. So there's a lot, and that's just a lot of experimentation. We're making products that are like that. Those kind of products are selling like crazy because that's more mainstream. Like the hardcore users still buy the majority of the product, and certainly the flower. But these manufactured products are, you know, we have a whole brand that's you know, literally designed for soccer moms, made by a soccer mom for soccer moms, you know, and it's, I mean, we've got a vape that is, you know, there's one that's energy, one that's appetite suppressant, one that's, you know, relax at night. And, you know, mom sets her vape on the counter, and her 8-year-old grabs it. It doesn't work because it's biometrically controlled by her hand. So we're putting in safety and different things that like make it say, oh, mom can have this, and it's not. It's something that is, you know, it's okay. And there's like a mommy group in LA that has like 69,000 people in it. You know, in Facebook just in LA, and you'd be amazed at how much they're talking about this, and there's whole discussions, and our mom who created this brand is very active in that space. So it's just an interesting thing, but those are like just using technology, low dose, ways to take the edge off. I think that's the future.
Any other questions? Yes.
Well, basically something to say, there's a specialty cigar industry, a very culturally rooted industry, has been for centuries. Cannabis, back in time, was a very cultural thing, still is. Medicine, used for rituals, all these things. It's come up to what it is now. Now there's a bill that's going before Congress. Basically, they want to eliminate the small family handle cigar industry because it can't be regulated. I mean, so it's worth the sort of parallels with the cannabis industry and the regulated tobacco cigar industry, where these people have been doing this forever, and then the government wants to come in and say, hey, this can't be regulated by the FDA, so therefore we want to close this down and introduce a bill that's going to eliminate it. So cannabis is coming really a long way, whereas other industries are struggling, to keep this cultural thing going. The same with specialty spirits. I mean, it takes centuries, generations to develop these products that in time honored protocol and a lot of the stuff that goes into it. So,
Well, if you went up to, certainly if you went up to Humboldt County, you would find a lot of people who are getting out of the business because they can't do it in the regulated business. There was, last I heard, there was 30,000 growers in Humboldt, and only about 750 had applied for licenses. So, you've got that's a cultural place, right? Like, I don't really go up there because, I don't think I'm the most popular guy in that neck of the woods, and people disappear up there. But it's, look, it's an evolution, and but there's plenty of room for craft brands and niche brands, certainly in the way California has done it. You just can't be all things to all people, and if a small producer tries to distribute throughout the state of California, they'll go bankrupt. But if they were a small producer and they have a local following and they sell to the local stores, it's kind of like a craft brewery. They can be very successful, but the day they go beyond their four walls and beyond their town, they're fighting with the rest of the market. And if they don't have a big distributor and they don't have a lot of ways to fight that fight with deep pockets, they have no chance. But they can still create a nice little business in their town. And I think that's the same in the cannabis space. I don't know much about specialty cigars, but
any other questions? All right. Well, I wanted to thank you guys for attending, and thanks to the panelists. If you want to talk to us after, obviously coming up. Thanks again.